Hi and welcome to the latest edition of the Leadership Untitled podcast, the show that brings an expert from the world of leadership and or L&D to help you guys hopefully avoid some of the traps that we've fallen into ourselves, but also provide you with just some hints and tips to make your workplaces a much better place to be. My guest this week is Major Charlotte Hayes. Now, Charlotte is an Army Major serving in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers Division. In March 2021, Charlotte posted a photo of herself on LinkedIn in full uniform, stating, "I am a leader, I am an Army officer, I am a chartered engineer," referring to the need to stop using gender pronouns which delineate between the capabilities of men and women. Around 1.5 million views, over 30,000 reactions and 1,500 comments later, I think it's safe to say that Charlotte's message was clearly resonated and evoked a positive response. It's that example of strong, authentic and vulnerable leadership that prompted me to ask Charlotte if she'd be a guest on the podcast to talk me through the experiences that had led to that post, but also her own experiences of leadership in the Army, as well as what we could all learn from them. So, less talk from me as I welcome Charlotte to the show. Hi Charlotte, welcome to the Leadership Untitled podcast. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Awesome stuff. It's we're going to get into kind of the nuts and bolts of your career and what it is you do. I just want to let the listeners know what it is that, or why it is rather, that I reached out to you on LinkedIn. And I think it's safe to say you can now call yourself LinkedIn viral. I think that's
Yes, apparently I am viral, but I'm not viral. The post is viral.
Correct. That said, it has got a wonderfully large picture of yourself. That's the first thing that came up.
Yes, and I read something which I do believe in. It's the person doesn't make the post viral. So although it does have my picture on it, it's potentially the words that resonate with everybody and the truth behind the post. So that's what's gone viral, not necessarily me.
Absolutely.
But I will concede that my photo does add a bit of drama.
No, I completely agree with you. Well, it is, and to cut to the chase, that is the words that you've put on there that meant I wanted to reach out to you. It just came up on my post. Now, obviously, we weren't connected beforehand, and it's because the kind of viral sense of what was going on that it appeared on my feed. And what I'll do is I can put a link to the post on in the notes so people can kind of see that as well, to see what we're actually talking about. But it's talking about, and I'm just like reading off the screen. If you can see me just looking off at the moment, it just literally started off. And you got to remember in LinkedIn, you can only see the first couple of lines before you click to see more sometimes as well. So the picture was there and it says, "I am a leader." And that's all I could see. And I thought, I'm in. And I clicked on it and it said, "I am an Army officer. I am a chartered engineer. I do not need the prefix female. My male counterparts have never had the prefix male. I do not delineate between the capabilities of each gender. And I think it's time we all took this approach. Value the individual and skills they bring, not what group you think they should belong to." And I just thought it was absolutely fantastic. And it that literally within a couple of minutes meant that I sent you an email and asked you if you'd like to come onto the show just to talk about, well, absolutely everything to do with your experiences in leadership. Not just that post, obviously, because there's a lot of years and decades that have gone into the creation of that post, I guess. So I guess for the listeners, let's start there. Let's start with an introduction to yourself. Let's see who you are, and give us a bit of a background of what it is you do, why you do it, and how you got there.
So I am Charlotte Hayes, and I am a female, and I'm very happy to be a female. I don't pretend I am not a female, but I've discovered from 17 years in the armed forces that I'm often referred to as the female officer or the female engineer. And this sometimes can make you feel like you're the second class version. And I noticed that my male colleagues are never referred to as the male officer or the male engineer. They're just the officer or the engineer. So I made my post. It was International Women's Day was approaching. There was lots of stuff about women in defence, women in engineering. So it was on my brain anyway. I was thinking about it. But another post that was gathering momentum by a lady called Ashley Sumner from America, who's a founder of a company. She was doing a similar post along the lines of I am a founder, not I am a female founder. And obviously I'm not a founder, I'm not a CEO of a company, but I thought, you know what, that's bang on. That is bang on. For 17 years, I have been an army officer, I have been an engineer, now I'm a chartered engineer. And for 17 years, I have been a leader, not a female one. Just that, I don't need that prefix. And in my team, the people that I work with, they're soldiers or they're officers. They're, again, not separated by anything that you could use to separate them. Yes, we all have different life experiences and we all come from different backgrounds, and that gives us lots of different skills and perspectives and wonderful things to cherish and help make our team a better team. But I don't need to prefix that person with those bits that make them different. So I just felt it was a little bit time just to say what I've been feeling for so long. And literally I just made my post. I honestly genuinely thought it would go unnoticed. I hardly had any connections on LinkedIn, and 1.5 million views, 30,000 comments, and 30,000 likes, and then 1,500 comments later. Inundated with requests to speak to people about my experience as a leader. So I joined the army in 2004. Why did I join the army? I actually really always wanted to be an engineer. That's all I ever wanted to be when I was at school. I absolutely loved electronic engineering, which was part of design and technology, and I loved technical drawing. So on leaving school, that's all I wanted to do. When I was at university, I joined a thing called the Officer Training Corps, which gave me a little bit of a flavour as to what the army's about. But most importantly, I think the engineering side of me was what was driving me the most. I really wanted to be an engineer, but I wanted to be an engineer in a different situation, not sat behind a desk. Yeah. And clearly, being an engineer in the army means you are not sat behind a desk.
I can imagine that.
You are out there. So I suppose that's where the nugget of joining the army started, working on exquisite technology. Not many people have tanks or attack helicopters or exquisite weapon systems. So yeah, the draw of working on something exciting, changing, demanding, and all around the world was the bit that drew me in. And then obviously at that point, you go through the selection process to become an army officer. So if they think you've got some potential, then they will offer you a place at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. And then that's sort of like where your leadership training starts. And it's not because you're not a natural leader, because they've done a whole assessment process before. So they've tried to identify what they think might make you a good leader anyway. And then it's all about your year at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst is all about developing and teaching you that. But you never stop developing and learning, ever. Every situation that you're in, you'll realise there's a new bit to your leadership style and you'll learn a new thing. And I certainly learned that in the recent pandemic, that they definitely need a more compassionate side of leadership when people are deal with the complexities of domestic situations as well as trying to do their day jobs.
So is that something that everyone going into the army gets a focus on then, their leadership skills and abilities, not just those who are leaders?
No, so even if you are a junior entry, even if you enter as a soldier, everybody is a commander and a leader in the army. So even a junior soldier, when they become a lance corporal and then corporal sergeant and up, they're a leader at every opportunity, and they're empowered to lead their teams or their subordinates.
Yeah.
So it's always everybody's a leader, but everybody's also a follower. So we do learn about followership and how important it is to support leaders and follow leaders. Obviously not follow unlawful orders or do anything that's not appropriate, but it's all about working together, having a great team ethos and having trust within the team. But ultimately you do need that figurehead, that leader that makes the decisions and potentially sets the tone, sets the feel, and leads everyone on towards the vision as a collective. It takes everybody with them, uses everybody's skills, and keeps everybody fully aware of why they're doing stuff. It's really important to know why we're doing this, so that they can be part of that vision, own a bit of that vision, feel empowered to contribute, and achieve it together.
I mean, immediately I kind of go, and we'll go more into this later on around where do we think some lessons could be learnt from the army in sort of wider society and business. But just what you just said there about everyone's a leader and everyone's a follower, and you cover both of those things when you join the army, regardless of where you're joining, what you're joining, at what level you're joining. That is amazing, and B, completely so remotely detached from the rest of business, because no one, very few. I mean, I've told the story quite a few times on here, so I won't go into the details of it again. That as a kind of a more sort of mid-level L&D professional, I wanted to go on to a leadership development course, and at that time I couldn't because I wasn't a leader of people. So it was quite short-sighted in that sense. And, you know, a lot of businesses still do the same thing, that people are brought on, they're taught to do the role, and out you go. There's nothing about what leadership is and what followership is. I mean, that not only is it a foreign concept, I think that's really an inspiring way to think about everyone joining a company.
Yeah, so even the lowest team in your organisation, even if they don't necessarily have a notional figurehead that's maybe a higher level, or, you know, define the leader, they might have just come together as a bunch of colleagues and are working on a project together as a team. But one of them will naturally lead the team. One of them will naturally do that. So that person's got some leadership skills and is leading. And we would recognise that in the army, and that person, we'd make sure that we empower them to enhance and improve on that, and coach and mentor them so that they can progress up the food chain, so to speak. So, but everybody who's in that team is also got a task that they're leading. So they might have been given a role or responsibility to lead on. So they're showing some form of leadership, self-initiative, you know, self-belief, and they're getting on with it, and then they're coming back together and collaborating. But all of them are also following. And followership doesn't mean you just follow orders, because there's a lot of misconception that in the army everybody just follows orders, you just do as you're told. No, they are not our values and standards. I mean, our standards are to be lawful, be appropriate, and be professional. So if anyone was to ask you to do something that isn't one of those things, then you wouldn't do it, and we would empower everyone to stand up and do the right thing. I
mean that's really, that really connects to something strong that I talk about sometimes on webinars as well. That there was a big trend that started in American sports in the 1990s around standards rather than rules. And I love the way that you talk there about the fact that there are certain standards in place that people will then basically filter everything that they're going to do or asked to do or are thinking to do just against those standards, rather than it having to be a rule book of 100 things that they're told not to do. It's a standard sheet of far fewer things that they know they need to embody at all times.
Yeah, so I suppose the academics would call it value-based leadership. So we have our values, which are courage, discipline, respect, integrity, loyalty, and selfless commitment. And then we have the standards, which are the appropriate behaviour, lawful and professional. And that's all you need to remember. And that's what you whatever you do, you need to abide by those. But you've also, with most leadership, you know, you need to be rewarded for good behaviour, but there also is discipline. And in the army, that's what you're disciplined against. And it is that simple. You're disciplined against those values and standards. And if you break those values and standards, then you can be disciplined against those. So it's really easy to know where the boundaries are, which helps. Can you do values-based leadership in civilian companies? I don't know. I think in the army, you have a real sense of unity and a sense of unity of cause. And it's probably to do with the role on operations, because when you go on operations, you are absolutely with each other 100%, and your teamwork, your cohesion, and your lives depend on each other. So there's a brotherhood, a sisterhood, and an unprecedented level of trust, because you literally have got each other's back. And I'm not sure. So you really believe in those values, you become those values, and that's kind of what binds you together. I'm not sure if in a civilian country, where companies have their values, how much buy-in there is, or whether people, come to work in the morning. Yeah, I believe in those values on the wall. Spot on. I'm with you. Oh, 5 o'clock, it's time to go home.
Yeah.
I've not worked in a civilian company, and I'd love to be, see where values-based leadership really does work. But I think the environment or the dynamics that you're in the army really encourage that sense of values-based leadership.
And I think there's a connection with what you've already talked about, and that is that, if you're brought in just to do a job, and you're told what that job is, and you're trained only to do that job, then I can see why that wouldn't necessarily lead to a connection. Whereas immediately, if I was to apply what you talked about there, about everyone's a leader and everyone is recognized as a leader, but equally as a follower, and again, are kind of trained and talked through and mentored through both of those things, that organically for me starts talking to the fact that there is something bigger at play than just what you're doing here, and you're connected to more of it than you think you probably are if you just do that job. And I can say that certainly in some of the corporate places that I've seen, that isn't the case. So you only do, you're told about these values that, as you quite rightly say, they're painted all over the wall at reception and in all the meeting rooms, but then you're just told to do your job. And so there isn't a map or a need almost sometimes to really live those values to do your job.
Yeah, so I feel a certain type of person joins the army anyway. I think that's probably a fair call to say. So you probably do already have some kind of drive to give something to other people, because a lot of us join for the excitement. I totally joined for the excitement. I wanted to be an engineer, and I wanted to be an exciting engineer. I didn't want us to be sat in a CAD office.
Yeah.
So that was the draw. But I think the hook, the bit that makes you stay, is that team ethos and that unity and that trust and that sense of purpose. And I find that when I'm in difficult situations and I'm trying to get my team to do something that they don't necessarily want to do, they really need to understand why. Why are we doing this? So even if it's in barracks and they've got to work really long hours because something important's coming up, why are they not at home with their families? Why are we doing this? So if they don't know why they're there and what they're doing it for, then they won't do it. So communication is key as well. So you really need to make sure that they understand what the higher aim is, the bigger picture, and how they fit into that. And then once you've done that, once they understand the why, you need to give them their bit of the why they're important. So you need to know your team and say to them, this is what we're going to do, and I'm choosing you to do this because you're good at this. So-and-so is going to help you because they're also good at this. You're going to collaborate together, you're going to work together, going to empower them to own their task. In the army, we have a thing called mission command. We never tell somebody how to do something. We tell them what effect we want at the end. So we empower them to come up with a solution or the route map to the end product themselves. Clearly, we'll get them to, what we would say, brief us on what their plan is to make sure, that the success, they're going to achieve success. We wouldn't just, let them go like lambs to the slaughter.
Yeah.
But we would encourage them to understand the higher level intent, and we would that's the why. We'd make sure we communicate that to them. And obviously my leaders are doing this to me. So they're telling me why, and they're communicating in a clear fashion, and then they're telling me what they want me to achieve. What they're not saying, at this time you'll do this, at this time you'll do that, and then you'll do X, Y, and Z. They're saying, this is what we want, go away, achieve it. So I'm empowered, I know why I'm doing it, and it's my plan, I get to own it.
Yeah. So there's a real clarity about that. There's a real clarity of expectations, but also there's a consistency all the way through the hierarchy.
So I'll get checked on. How's your plan going? Have you thought about this? You know, I'll be mentored and coached and maybe stirred a bit if I'm going off piste.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll be doing that to my subordinates, to my team. And then from that, they're all growing, developing, mentoring as well. And then there just generally becomes a really good team effort to make things work and to achieve things as a team. Leadership goes wrong when the leader is all out for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking up all the time, looking up. What does my boss want? What does he want me to do? What's going to make me look good? That's when it all goes wrong, because for me, that's not the point of leadership. Leadership is a service. You are serving your followers, your subordinates. Every day, whatever you do is for them. So you can't constantly be looking up to see what's going to make you look good, because you won't have your team with you, and you won't look good without any support. It's a bit like having good family support at home.
Yeah.
So you need to be looking up to make sure you know what you've got to achieve, but you really need to be looking down and outwards. You need to be looking down to make sure that you know your team, you know what they're good at, and you know what they're capable of. And then that way, whatever you need to achieve, you can achieve it together. And you as a leader need to work really hard to help them to work, to empower them and to bring out their skills and to use their skills. And that way you'll achieve whatever the task is. And then the byproducts are that, you know, when you do look up, you know, they go, oh, you did that well. Yeah. And you're like, yes, thank you. It was my team and I. It was never just I.
So there's a real focus there on really understanding your people, understanding where they are now in their journey, but also what it is you can do to help them unlock their true potential, whether it's with you or with each other or by other means, to really get them to perform at the top of their game, even if they didn't know they were capable of that.
Yeah. So you really need to know in the army, you really need to know your team. And I don't just mean you need to know what point in their career they're at, whether they're eligible for promotion, what training courses they need to do or have done. You need to know them. And if that means you need to know their families' names, their children's names, what their hobbies are, you don't need to know it in detail, but you need to be able to have a conversation with them. So if you see them looking down or just at a loose end, you can say, how was your weekend? Did you go mountain biking? Or did you spend time with your kids, you know, Ben and Adam or whatever? You need to know enough detail so that they know that you know them and that you're invested in them. And then that brings the trust. And then also
we got sirens going past. They're coming to get me or you. I don't know which one it is. Or both of us.
So you know not just enough, but if you know enough about your team to be able to have a pleasant, personable conversation, and then you know about their professional side in detail, so you know their skills, what they need, what they do for their careers, then you can build trust and you can communicate. And then I just feel that adds a personal touch. And famous quote from Slim is, "Leadership is just you, just plain you."
Yeah, well, you talked about authenticity a lot, and when we chatted the other week, and that's at the key of what you've just been talking about there. Just so many times in big office environments, that Monday morning chat is very much, "You're all right, yeah, you're all right, yeah. Do you have a good weekend? Yeah. Did you? Yeah, thanks. Right, catch you later." There's like a quick attempt at connection, but on the route to let's get something done here. What is it you need? Whereas that's much more of I really need to understand my people. Let's just ask some questions. Let's have a conversation. Forget about what it is we're here to do for a second. How's the person who's going to be doing it?
Yeah, because I felt myself when I come into work and someone says to ask me how my children are by their names, or how my husband is by his name, or because, you know, like most people in the army like to do crazy sport, they ask me like how my latest half marathon or triathlon was.
Yep.
I feel really touched that they've taken the time to take an interest in me and that they've remembered things that are important to me. And that naturally makes me like want to work for them a little bit more, a little bit harder, because I think this person's taken an interest in me. So I this is something I learned as quite a junior officer. I was just before I deployed to Afghanistan. My company commander at the time, who's a major, which is the rank I am now, and I was a lieutenant, he said to me, "Wow, you really know your soldiers. You know everything about them." And I just thought, yeah, I do. And then I found that when we were in Afghanistan and we were having, our quiet moments, our downtimes, the fact that I was able to say to them, have you written to, have you received an email? How's so-and-so back at home? Are you missing, people by name? I could just see that they just like welled up inside a little bit, that I'd remembered and that I cared. And I think that goes a long way. So I learned that quite junior, just to invest in people and their lives.
And that was because the people who your leaders and superiors were doing that with you.
Yeah. So people would remember, at that point, I wasn't married, I didn't have children, but, people would know that I was probably off doing an Ironman or a triathlon at the weekend. And they would say, like, what was your time? How was your swim? How was your bike? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, and I'd be really enthusiastically talking about it. And then I'd go away with like a nice feeling, thinking, oh, that person was interested in me, not just interested in what they wanted me to do. They were interested in me. So I liked that feeling. And then I made a point of making sure that I knew I did that to my team. So I knew if they had children, what their names were, how old they were, what their wives did for a living or their husbands did for a living, what their crazy mad hobbies were too. And I just made a point of just finding out about them. And then as soon as I knew a little bit more about them, we could have those more sort of like personal conversations. They also became much more relaxed around me.
Yeah, I bet.
Which helps, and I just think that it just really helped the relationship and the trust go. When I spoke to you before, Rob, I touched on about the REME is unique. So in the way that sometimes our soldiers know more than we do, and I'd say that soldiers around the world will say we all know more than the officers. So, all hands up, you all know more than the officers, but. They will definitely attest to having more common sense. Anyway, in the REME, which is the Royal Corps of Electrical Mechanical Engineers, for those that don't know, the best way I describe us to people that don't know anything about it is we are green flag or the AA or the RAC, to show no facism.
Yeah. Other breakdown companies are available.
Other breakdown companies are available. Even Frank's Garage under the arches. Yeah, or the Websters off Corrie. Anyway, I've digressed. So any piece of equipment, Apache attack helicopter, Challenger main battle tank, to a piece of engineer bridging, to a radio system, our communication systems, and weapon systems from, pistol, all the way up to maybe a sniper rifle, all the way up to a radar cannon on a armoured fighting vehicle. Anything that breaks, the REME, the recovery mechanics go get it. If we can repair it where it's broken down, being blown up, even under fire, do our best to put it back in the hands of the army as quick as we can. We can't repair it at point of failure, then we bring it back through the echelons to the safer places, depending on how much it needs, how much repair it needs. So that's our job.
And that's where Everett breaks down, which could literally be anywhere in the world, potentially, at any point, at any sort of situation.
Yeah, so, on operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, which are probably most recent in most people's minds, in that kind of asymmetric warfare, it's 360 degrees. There's no front line. There's no front line. It's coming from all directions. So wherever the infantry, cavalry are out on the ground, using the equipment, getting their part of the job done, wherever they get struck by mine strike, weapon systems, or they unfortunately, and we really hope they don't, just have a mechanical failure, because we try to do preventative maintenance in those situations so that they won't break down when they go out, because that's a bad day at the office.
Yeah.
If you're broken down, if you get hit, that's a bad day at the office, but at least it was due to enemy action, not a bit of friendly mechanism failure.
Yeah.
So wherever they go, the recovery mechanics, we have forward repair teams. have a vehicle mechanic, maybe an electronics technician, they'll go forward, and if they can get that vehicle fixed and back straight in the fight there and then, they'll do it. If not, then it can come back and we can repair it, because clearly you're not going to start changing an engine while the enemy's shooting at you, because that's just stupid. You're going to get it back to a safe location.
Sounds reasonable to me, yeah.
It sounds reasonable. So my role as an engineering officer is basically to understand what needs to be done and to manage all the sort of resources that I've got. So I need spares, I need a facility to fix vehicles, and I obviously need the manpower to do so. Now, I don't know how to dismantle the inner workings of a sniper rifle, for example, or I don't know how to change an axle on a massive armoured vehicle. I don't know how to do those things. That's what my soldiers do. They're engineers too. They are trained to do the tactical engineering straight in.
Everyone's screaming at the screens right now, Charlotte, going, how do you not know how to do that? We all know how to do that.
So that's what they're the experts in. So when I can't fix the electronics and then attach that helicopter, an avionics technician can do that. But what I need to do is I need to be able to understand how much is broken and how long it's going to take us to fix it all. And I need to translate all of that back up to the higher command and say to them, this is the situation, what equipment we're going to have ready for you for the next start or the next phase of the battle, so that you can carry on fighting. And for me to do that, I really need to trust my soldiers, because the power is in their hands, because they're the experts on how long it's going to take to fix a piece of kit, realistically, in those situations and with how it's damaged. And obviously in a war situation, it's getting some quite unique damage, from enemy action.
Yeah.
So you really, really have to trust their expertise and their knowledge. So even though it's your most junior member of your team, they actually now have a lot of knowledge and power, and you can help. You need that knowledge and power to help influence your plan, your decisions, so that you can read higher command at how long things are going to take. So I think the dynamics in the REME, things are switched around a little bit, because although I'm always the leader, I really need their expertise, and being an engineering officer is also about understanding everything, because clearly that I need to not be blagged, is the word. I need to not have the wool pulled over my eyes.
You need to know enough.
I need to know enough. I need to know enough, but I don't need to know the detail. And then obviously, again, the commanding officer that I'll be working for won't be a REME officer. So I don't need to go up to him and start telling him that the wiring loom in the it's burnt out, because he'll be like, what? He wants to know, when is his vehicle or helicopter or weapon system going to be back working, because he needs it for X, Y, and Z. So you're a bit of a translator there. And then, so I think in the REME, it's really important that you have these engineering qualifications so that you can understand your soldiers. And I have actually been in situations, funnily enough, in Afghanistan, when we had a vehicle that had a vehicle fire. And because I'm an electronic engineer, that's what I did at university, my soldiers were having a real hard trouble rewiring the wiring loom. They couldn't follow the circuit diagram. They were like, this makes no sense.
That sounds like me with an MFI wardrobe.
So
I should say MFI now. It's IKEA now, not MFI.
I was like, pressure. Do I admit that I did electronic engineering at uni?
Yeah.
About to make a fool of myself. I'm really putting myself on the line here. But I said, right, let's have a look. And thankfully, I remembered what they taught me at university. Loughborough will be proud. And we worked out the wiring loom and we did it together. So that's another point I'd like to make about leadership, is I have learned never, ever ask anyone to do something you won't do yourself, even if that's sweeping the floor or making a cup of tea. So if you're not prepared to roll your sleeves up and get stuck in and help your team out, then don't be a leader, because you need to show that you're willing to do it as well. And to be fair, that day is one of my proud days, and definitely the soldiers in Afghanistan at the time will remember that, because they could not believe that I could do it.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant.
So they're like, oh, maybe she does know a bit about engineering.
It's a conversation that I've had quite a lot with a couple of particularly a couple of connections of mine that I used to work with, around just how much of a role does a leader need to know. You know, should they be able to do everything within that role? Should they be able to understand everything in that role? Or do they not need to know anything about that role, their role as a leader? And for me, it's never as simple as saying it's that one or it's that one or it's that one. There's different styles, different people and different situations. Well, good example, you've mentioned coaching. I know that there's debates out there to kind of go, as a coach, is it better for you to not to know the subject, and so therefore you're less inclined to get involved in the answer? And then sometimes, though, people actually want a coach who has some experience, so they can maybe lend some bit of that experience to the situation. How does that work in the army? Is one of those more prevalent than the other?
So I suppose what you were talking about there is, like, when you don't know something, and you're coaching someone and you don't know the subject, have you got any credibility? Maybe. Mm-hmm. Because I personally feel that I would resonate, or I would naturally trust somebody who I knew maybe had a qualification or an experience in that area. So I think credibility really helps with coaching. So the fact that I'm an engineer as well gave me a little bit of credibility instantly. You've got to prove it, you know, you got to put money where your mouth is, but I think that credibility helps. So I think with coaching soldiers and junior officers, because being a major now, I have the luxury of having captains and lieutenants that sometimes have to work for me. I find that if you've got common ground, it really helps. It does help, and it does give you that credibility. And I think, looking at just myself personally, when I've potentially been coached through my career, if someone's physically been in that situation, I do feel a sense of, well, how did it work out for you in that situation? And I feel myself that if I'm trying to help someone in a situation where I've not been through before, I always caveat it with, well, I've not been through this, and I don't feel as confident as a person, maybe. Because I'm saying I can give you some general advice, but maybe not some really pointed advice. And
sometimes there might be some sort of credibility in that in itself, but I get that, because one story that reminds me of, it was years ago. There was the rugby coach, Clive Woodward, or Sir Clive Woodward, as he now is, that won the World Cup with the team, and he later became involved at some level with Southampton Football Club, and there were rumours for a while that they were considering him to be the manager for Southampton Football Club. And that sparked a big debate at the time to kind of go, well, he's obviously a great sports leader. He's led a country to the World Cup, but he knows nothing about football. He's rugby. So he can't possibly go and do that, can he? And it's kind of playing into what you're saying there. And like the credibility, he's obviously got a set of skills that makes him credible at that level, but he hasn't got the experience, or less of an experience, that makes him go, I don't think you can apply those skills in this area.
Yeah, so they would just definitely had to let him have a go and see, because there's so many parallels in that, in elite sport, you know, managing elite sport, managing a team. And there's so many parallels, but obviously the only real difference is the actual rules of the game and the game. And is that a big difference, that you couldn't lead that team? I think it's definitely a potential blocker. So I think that's what would there be a resistance? There would be well, he picks the ball up.
Yeah, can't teach him to do that.
How,
and you're allowed to pass it forwards now.
How can that possibly translate to football? But if you were to unpick the actual skills, you know, knowing about elite sport, knowing about training, about how the body works, about nutrition, you know, how to get the best out of people. If you looked at it purely on a skills level, then he's probably one of the best people for the job on that level. But what would block him is this misconception that he's a rugby player, not a footballer. So if people could get over that, but yeah, he definitely, I think that would be maybe the team's perception of him, the way they're looking at him.
Yeah.
That brings me to another one of my little leadership points. Self-awareness, but not, you need to understand how your team will see things. So you've almost got a counter plan. Because when you're trying to communicate the why we need to do something and to get them on board, you've almost got to think about how they will see it and what they will think of it, so that you can potentially be prepared for those questions. So you've almost got your counter answers ready. So I think,
And what's the best way to prepare yourself for that, do you think?
Oh, what's the best way to... Well, goes back to what I said, know your team. Know your team, because if you know your team, you'll know what they'll come up with first.
Yeah.
You'll know instantly, Frank's going to say this, Sue's going to say that, Sarah's going to bring this one up. I'm ready for you. not in a like adversary, like not in a, in an aggressive manner.
No.
But just, this is the plan, this is the why. I'm going to have to sell this. I'm going to have to sell this to the team, because the team are going to want to do this. I'm going to explain to them why we need to do it, but ultimately it might result in late nights, not getting home, see the families, hard work, hard graft, a bit of grit and determination on their part. And I need to see how they're going to look at it, so that I can make sure that when I'm communicating why we need to do this, I can alleviate these fears.
And it stitches together with all the things you've been saying, actually, not just the first points, that yes, by understanding your people, but also for the fact that you trust them to be specialists in their field, that they'll know things that you don't know. So by knowing the things that they know that you don't know, by just that connection, you'll be able to kind of go, oh, well, I'll need to prepare for this, because I know that person is going to ask something from this angle, because they're an expert in there, and they'll be wondering how it impacts this role that they need to do to achieve this target. So I need to prepare those types of answers. And again, it's so much, and it might sound kind of weird to say, because when you say it out loud, you think, why would anyone not do it that way? But again, in kind of more private enterprise and large corporations, perhaps more so, that's not always the case. And again, people will kind of go, right, well, we've come up with what we need people to do. We've come up with the idea. We're just going to tell them and they can crack on with it. And then when the questions come back, they're going, why aren't you just as passionate about this as I am?
Yeah.
Why aren't you just rolling with this and excited to get into it? Just like I've spent the last 2 weeks like building this, you should be like hooping and hollering about this. But because you spent 2 weeks in the detail of it, and this is the first time these people have heard anything about it.
I mean, I'm not saying that you have to be a salesman, because with the connotation of salesman, some of our minds instantly go to the dodgy used car salesman.
We're back to Frank again in the extenders here.
We're back to the dodgy car salesperson that potentially sells us a dead vehicle. So I'm not saying like honesty, trust, integrity, they are key. But there's big studies into transformational leaders and charismatic leaders, and does a person need to be charismatic for you to follow them? And I don't necessarily think that someone has to be standout charismatic for you to follow them. They just need to have you just need to have the team with you. So in those situations, and those situations we talk about in a corporate sense, on really like change management situations, when people come in with a whole new way of doing things, more efficient, we're going to be streamlined, and we're going to put in a new computer file system and everything's going to work. And everyone's just like, what's wrong with the old system? It works for us because we use it every day. This doesn't work for you because you don't use it every day. Yeah. So I mean, in those situations, I want to say you've got to sell the plan, but sell the plan makes you feel like I'm saying, you've got to lie to them a bit. You never lie to them. You've just really got to communicate why you're doing it. And you've really got to bring them on board. So rather than just say, I'm doing this to you and I'm going to make you follow this new plan. This is a new plan. You're really good at this part. You're going to lead on this part. You're going to work with so-and-so who's not done this before, so you're going to bring that person on, or that person's got a little bit of experience and might be able to help. And they've really got to own the plan with you. They've got to be empowered to make it an success. They've got to understand why, and they've just really got to be brought into it.
Well, it's actually what an interesting parallel is. I've recorded an episode, I think it's coming out in a couple of weeks, with a gentleman called Steve Purdom, who was, he's actually a CEO of a company that I used to work at, which is how I knew him. And in his story, he talked about, it's just weird, the overlap actually that you've just covered, that he talked about being in his kind of before the big success, he was very much a salesman, and then kind of a head of sales and looking after salespeople. And he went, and then one day they needed to kind of give the company a boost in some sort of way, and he was asked to take over the marketing department. And at that time, he thought of that as being a demotion. He thought of people who did marketing were people who failed at sales. But it was actually his wife, and I think we in the pre-chat about this, we just talked about his wife. They brought him a cup of tea on the episode of the podcast. Waved to me, absolutely brilliant. Hi Julie, if you're there. And it was actually her that kind of pushed him and said, "Do you actually know what marketing really is?" And on the back of that, he went onto a course around strategic marketing. And he said that was the thing that changed everything from that day for him when it came to leading and developing a company and leading the people towards the vision. Because it wasn't about trying to sell them the vision and sell them the why. It was, when you look at marketing, whether it's your customer or your people, it's understanding them. It's understanding what their needs are and what their requirements are and why they should be interested in what it is that you're putting out into the world. And then creating a strategy that works with and for them to build that thing. So they actually want it. They're actually connected to it rather than feel like it's being pushed on them. Does that kind of fit in what you're talking about as well? Not selling, but more marketing.
Yes, so it's definitely, so this is a bit of sort of behavioural psychology here, target audience analysis. So know your audience. So those that are against you, they're against you. And then you've got those that are with you. They're with you. So those that are with you, I'm not saying ignore them, but you don't need to sell them anything. But you can use them because they're already with you. Those in the middle that are here nor there, that's your target rich environment. Get those ones on board. So the ones that are already on board with the idea and are in the plan, invested in the plan, get your big middle section that don't know if they're in or out to be in as well. Yeah. And then these guys on the periphery that don't really want to do it, they'll start migrating in because they'll see everybody else doing it and everybody else getting on board, and it's a little bit of sort of sheep action going on. But when they're resisting on their own, they'll soon stop resisting. But obviously still communicate with them, empower them, give them tasks to do to bring them on time. But yeah, I'm definitely, I'm very interested in psychology and how the mind works and how people see things, view things from a different point of view, and how that can all contribute to your team. But then when you're sat there as a leader and you're trying to bring something new in, if you can understand the dynamics a little bit more and use that to your advantage. And
understanding those people again, just talking to them, like say, asking them how the weekend was and learning stuff about them, all really helps in that. I mean, a lot of academics talk about it in terms of what you've been talking about there, law of diffusion of innovation. So it's things like, it's not the people who will queue outside the Apple store for 12 hours before it opens on launch day that you need to convince to buy a new iPhone.
No,
it's the people that are out there that have said they've never wanted one, or people that are on the verge of thinking, well, should I go for one next time? Because they're going to buy it, whether it's the worst iPhone in history or not. Excuse me, they're going to buy and queue for that iPhone.
They absolutely are. And then a bit of a, just to draw some parallels, is see, I was definitely the against when Apple was storming the market, and I loved my BlackBerry. I loved having a quirky keyboard.
God, I had a BlackBerry. My wife had two BlackBerries. I had a BlackBerry. I can remember getting one of the latter BlackBerries and people looking at me going, "Why have you still got one of them?" Loved them, absolutely loved them.
Yeah, and I did. I just loved the quirky keyboard. Yeah, and then unfortunately, because the market was dominated by obviously Apple, I just eventually progressed into the middle ground.
Yeah.
I'm still not going to queue up at the Apple shop, but yeah.
No, it's true, but it got me. I got a Blackberries, and I went Android phones for a while, and then I dipped my toe into the Apple world and got an iPhone and an iPad, and it was brilliant. But then I gave my head a shake about 3 years later, and I went, no, I'm going to go back. I'm going to get an Android phone. I think it was a Samsung. And I just missed the simplicity when things started to go wrong. I went, I'm going back, and here I am now. I'm talking to you on an Apple MacBook. I've got an iPhone sitting over there with the AirPods next to it, and that's it. I'm in the ecosystem now. There's no escaping.
Well, talking about Apple, it's something that Steve Jobs has reportedly said about always being challenged by his team, or pushed by his team. So just bringing it back to leadership and the army, you've got a really good close-knit team, and in your team you've got a hierarchy, you've got structures. So I just said, I've got captains, lieutenants, but most importantly, I've got senior soldiers, I've got sergeant majors and staff sergeants, and they have been in their game for so long. They know what they're doing. They're so professional, they're so experienced, and they're qualified. And those guys and ladies are the best sounding board. So even when you, as a leader, don't know what to do next, or you meet yourself with a situation that you're unsure of, that sort of like higher level of senior soldier, you like middle management, you absolutely go for them and you say, guys, help, give me some ideas. And they'll pick you up when you're down, and they'll say, you're doing a good job, you've made the right decision, we're with you. They'll back you up, and they'll also tell you when you're stupid. That's a stupid idea, we'll do it this way. And then hopefully you've got enough good sense to say, yes, Sergeant Major, absolutely, Sergeant Major.
But that's where that trust comes back in again, doesn't it, Charlotte, that you talked about? If you build that level of trust up, give it and build it, then when that challenging conversation, as some might call it, comes along, then you actually do trust in the person that they're saying it for a reason. If you don't do that, if you don't build that trust up first, and that people could just construe that as that's an attack, or they're trying to bring me down, or they're trying to discredit me. It's not, and quite often, sometimes it is. That's the reason why people are doing it, because the trust hasn't been built. But in your world that you talk about, that trust being the key of it, it's easier to start saying you're doing this from a good place.
We are like when you're learning about being a leader, you really need to, for me, what was really easy to do was to look at leadership traits in some of my leaders that I didn't like and say to myself, I am not going to do that. Really easy to identify those traits, those bad traits, because they're easy, because they make you feel angry or mad yourself as the person that's receiving that behaviour. So I instantly recognised what I was not going to do. But it's only really more recently that I've noticed that those leaders that invite challenge and say, challenge me, I've come up with an idea, challenge me. And they don't mean challenge me in an aggressive, like insubordinate, unruly way, as I'm not doing that way. They mean go away, think of this critically, constructively, and come back and present to me your challenge, and then I will take the time to sit down with you and either take some of your points on board, or just explain to you in more detail how I've got to my point. And that's only something that's happened to me recently, where I've had some really good leaders that have said, challenge me. So I've gone away, I've thought about it, and then I've gone back in with what I'm concerned about, and they've sat down and they've talked through all of my concerns, and they've explained some other points that I might have not known about, and then they basically explained to me how they got to the point of their decision, and then I've just gone, wow, goes back to the why. I know why now. I know why. So what I've taken away from there is that why, and the clear communication obviously brings the trust. So before that conversation, I was against the plan. I wasn't in. I thought it was a stupid plan. I went away and did a little bit of thinking. I came back and in a polite way said, I don't like your plan. It took the time, sit me down and go through the plan and explain angles, avenues, bits of information that I wasn't privy to. And then I came out of that going, yeah, it's a really good plan, actually. Really good.
Yeah. Did a good marketing conversation.
Yeah. So I just think that, do you know what? The times where I've been in where I've briefed the plan and people have thought it's stupid, and I've had to, sometimes in my more junior days, I've had to get in look. You know, this is the plan, we're doing it. We're doing it. I've now learned that if I just take the time to identify who that person is, give them the opportunity to go away, collect their thoughts, and then come back to me and then sit down and discuss it all through. You turn your hater into your champion.
Well, businesses are using some terminology like this now. They'll talk about going into the war rooms or the battle teams or things like that, just corporates, and not going into any wars or any battles here, but they're just in a room somewhere sitting in Manchester or London or something. But the idea being that this type of experimental leadership, where I've had this idea, or it might not be the leader that's had the idea, someone else or a team comes in, there's the idea. How could we strengthen it? How can we challenge it? Do we think this could work? And if we do think it could work, do we think it could be better? Could it be bettered by anyone else's ideas? If this is a 7 out of 10, by working together, could we make it a 9, 10 out of 10?
Yeah. And I'm not suggesting we all start hooping and volleying and high-fiving each other. That's not very British.
No, don't like that. We're British. No emotion, stiff upper lip.
Well, I welcome all difference. If you want to hoop and volley and high five, we will. But it does definitely bring a better sense of cohesion and team spirit and unity to work to achieve that together. Once everybody really understands why they are doing it. For me, and that's something key, why am I doing this? Yeah. And then as soon as I know why, the marketing plan has worked on me, the salesperson's got a sale, I'm in.
Brilliant stuff. You mentioned a few times that you were over in Afghanistan. How long were you over there?
So I've done 2 roles in Afghanistan, spanning 7 months in total. So my first role was what's called a engineering officer out on the ground. So obviously being an engineer, I was with the Light Dragoons, in Garmsea. So we were out in forward operating bases in Garmsea, and the Light Dragoons battle group were out doing their things with the Mercians, and we were basically responsible for keeping all their kit going so that they could do anything out in the forward operating base there and going down to the checkpoints. Whilst I was there, even though I don't like to be seen as the female, it was quite handy that I was the female. So I was actually asked to volunteer to go on all the infantry foot patrols to act as a female searcher to search women and children. They needed to be searched because they were potentially bringing things into the local area that they shouldn't have been bringing in. Yeah. I was out on foot patrol with the infantry a lot before women were allowed in the infantry. So I was out doing that as my day job. And then my night job was sort of obviously running the what we call a light aid detachment, which is what I said, the AA to the army, making sure that all their equipment was fixed and ready to go back out the door, fit ready the next day.
So what was the longest amount of time you were out there then, in one chunk?
7 months in one chunk, because I did that job for 4 months, and then I moved to a different job, which was in Kandahar, which again was being an engineering officer in a headquarters situation, and obviously planning the more higher level, strategic level engineering things that we needed to do. So at this time, there was a lot of press about the army not having the right equipment in theatre.
Yeah.
This is when we had all the Mastiffs and foxhounds and all the new equipment we were bringing into theatre. So in that role, my job was basically bringing all the new equipment into theatre and get it fielded and out to the forward location so that the soldiers had the right kit, making sure that they were trained on it when it came into theatre, it had all the right equipment on it, was working. And then in that role as well, I was also heavily involved in trialing new kit. So we trialled Project Peacock and we trialled all the new uniform. So our new camouflage uniform that's been in now for quite a few years, back in 2009-10, we were still in the old either desert camouflage if you were out on ops, and you weren't very well camouflaged in the green zone. So that was one of my jobs, to trial all the new equipment, going out on the ground and making sure we couldn't be seen if we had certain patterns on. And then I also did a lot of work with the senior scientist, doing stuff with ground disturbance technology. We've got drones that fly over and can basically see if someone's been there by the fact that the ground's been messed with, even if it's been walked on, just even if it's just walked on by an animal. The technology we've got, you can see that the ground's being disturbed. So spent a lot of time investing in our future technologies to keep the British Army competitive. So very different roles. So one, out on the ground with my soldiers, leading those REME soldiers, making sure all the equipment's fixed, and even going out with the infantry, and very much being a soldier on the ground, to being in a headquarters, being an officer, making sure that everybody's got the right equipment, and then even having the time to experiment with new future equipment that will come in and obviously change the way we fight going forward, and having better technology. So two very different roles.
So how easy or tough was that from kind of a self leadership point of view? Being, well, we actually found out when we chatted the first time that you only lived down the road from me for many years in Staffordshire. How tough was it to be away from home from those chunks of times? Is it something you get used to? Is it? You tell me your words.
So, right. So when you first go, because I've served in Northern Ireland, I've done big exercises in Kenya on 2 occasions, and then obviously going to Afghanistan. It's all quite exciting. And when you're young and single, it's what you really want to do. You want to go and do it. And you don't necessarily understand the reality of it until you're there. And then when you're there, it's classic, isn't it? Shit gets real.
Yeah, suddenly you realise why you're there.
So your training prepares you. So the Army's very good at training everybody, getting everybody prepared. You do a really intensive pre-deployment training package. You do all of that sort of stuff, and then when you are deployed in Afghanistan, you sort of realise that you are sometimes really, in a leadership position, sometimes you're a little bit on your own. Because you're the only one, and you've got your team beneath you, and you sort of carry all their fears and worries and stresses and strains. But for me in particular, what I found works is I would just relate it back to knowing your team. And if they know you, so you've got to be human. You're a human. You've really got to be you. You've got to be a human. So on our days in Afghanistan, and we did have some tough days because not everybody came home with us that we went out with. And those are really tough days, and you've just got to carry on. You can't not carry on. So in those situations, that's when the humility comes into it, the compassion and the empathy, and just being an actual thoroughly decent human being. And you sit down and you just have a chat. And you potentially even have a cry together. We sat around our makeshift campfire with our deck chairs that were made out of blown up chairs out of vehicles that didn't need their chairs anymore. And empty ammo tins. Sounds a bit like something you'd seen in a war movie, but it's true. And we just sat around and we just had a chat. We had a chat about what made those people that are no longer with us great. And we laughed. And we basically resolved that they'd want us to crack on. So we'll just crack on.
Sounds very family.
Yeah, very family.
Is the word that's coming to mind.
It is very family. And then you have your moments where you're still the leader. So you've just got to get on with the next task, but you've got to show you're human. You've got to show you're human, because if you just pretended things like that didn't happen, then I don't think your team will think very much of you.
No.
So you've definitely got to show that you're human. You've got to show your vulnerabilities. It just all helps build towards the trust and the kind of the sense of unity that you all have. It does bind you closer together. All of those soldiers that I was in Afghanistan with, I remember every single one of them, and I still talk to them. I think when you've been through situations like that, a lot of them wished me well, because I've told them about my LinkedIn post, and I said to them, it's because of you guys, because I absolutely wouldn't be here and be who I am today if I didn't have you shaping me. So thank you for being part of my journey. So a lot of them are signing up to listen. And yeah, so they know where they are.
Brilliant.
And so yeah, I just yeah, it's lonely sometimes. It's lonely sometimes, but I think that's why you're the leader and you're paid maybe a bit more than money. But it goes down to what I said before about leadership being a service. You're there to serve the others. So I was definitely there to serve them and try to bring them all home and look after them best as I could.
I know we're talking about two sort of separate worlds, but I just think that part of one of my my start of my leadership framework, which talks about the myself piece around self-leadership, which is why I was really interested in that side of your story, talks about the legacy and fulfillment that you want to have in the role that you're doing in your career. And it's wonderful to hear you talk about the family that you had whilst at work, and the sharing of the stories and the emotional sharing, because that's what we are. That's what makes us human. The fact that we can think and feel and have emotions and talking about those things. And I just kind of wonder that, again, for people listening to this now and leaders out there, whether it's you're reflecting back on a career that's towards the end, or whether you're building a career that you've got many future years ahead of you, that's a really powerful way to think about your leadership style. That is that when you get to that point, as you're reflecting with me today, Charlotte, that what connection have you got with that team? What will they think of you when that journey's come to an end? Will you all still be talking to each other and connecting to each other because of the relationships that you've built? Or are you not? And why is that?
But one of the things that I'm most proud of is that a lot of the people that I've worked with are still in touch with me. I mean, yes, social media helps, but what really makes me proud is that when they're in a fix, they ring me.
Yeah.
That just shows, because I've not been their platoon commander or their captain for years, and they're still, the minute they're in a fix, they ring me.
That's awesome.
And I just think that just shows that I had the right impact on you, because I know which leaders I would ring when I needed some help. And the fact that they still ring me, or they still contact me, or even you're walking down the road and they see you across the road, rather than go, they're like, hi,
come here quick.
how are you doing? So that's
amazing.
That feedback tells me I got it right. For them, I got it right. I mean, I probably didn't get it right for everybody, but for some, I got it right. And that just, yeah.
Well, yeah, some people don't get it right for anybody. And I think that's the thing, just being able to lead in a way. And you mentioned social media. Social media it's a paradox in itself, because I actually think that whilst it's easier to connect, I think social media doesn't actually mean people connect. Most of the time it's people just follow each other to be nosy of what other people are doing. They're not actually talking. So the fact that despite that, and people being connected on social media, they're still ringing you or coming over to you, because it is that connection that's strong. Not just we did work together, so we'll kind of connect. We didn't just work together, we lived together, we shared together, we went through everything together in a work environment.
Definitely. And so I just wanted to say, like, when you go away on operations with you're all going away. So you're all like leaving your families behind. You've got your great support network, but you're all going away, and off you all go together. When the COVID and the global pandemic struck, obviously the majority of the army, we were all put on notice to help. It's called military aid to civilian authority. So we had all of our soldiers under our commands anyway. And at the time, I was a company commander at a training regiment, so I had 350 soldiers under my command. And we needed to follow direction, which was to send them home. Government guidelines, everyone wants to go home and isolate. So we needed to send them all home. We needed to, because most of them are trainees, and we needed to do that safely and efficiently. And we needed to make sure that they had safe homes to go to, and that they would be, well looked after, and they had somewhere to go. Sometimes soldiers join the army and the parents rent out the spare room. So, we needed to make sure that they had somewhere safe to go to where they'd be well looked after. So we needed to do that, but I needed also to do that when my own team, so all of my sergeants, staff sergeants, sergeant majors and lieutenants and captains and my corporals, all of them, we've not actually gone away for operations. We're still at home. So normally where we get to remove ourselves from the pressure of our domestics, all of a sudden I was charged with leading people in a completely new dynamic. The domestic situation was a real big factor. And for the first time, I saw real vulnerability in some of the soldiers, where they looked at me as if to say, my partner's got a condition they need to shield. I feel compromised because I want to come in and do my job, my duty, but my partner's got to shield. And oh no, my wife's a nurse and I've got 5 children. Or no, I should say, oh no, my husband's a nurse and I've got 5 children. And, the schools are closed and panic. What am I going to do? I'm torn. So in that situation, for the first time ever, we've been in a situation where domestics was right at the front. Rather than leaving all our families behind and off we went to be heroes, had a complete new dynamic in the mix. And for this one, I just felt it was really simple. The government had put all their guidelines out, all their rules out. I just made the decision. I was like, right, your wife's a police officer, you have 2 children out of school, you go home, goodbye. We'll crack on without you. Right, your wife works in the care home, care homes are really strapped, you've got 2 children, you go home, we'll crack on without you. Right, I've sent those 2 home, you need to step up now. We need to work together. We've got reduced manpower and we've got a sense of urgency and we need to get on with it. And I found that after it all, the soldiers that I'd shown real compassion and sent home to go and look after their domestic situations and their children, they came back to me afterwards and they were just like, thank you so much. You've no idea how much stress I was under. I was trying to tear myself in 2, one to be at home, one to be at work, and you just told me what to do. Thank you for making such a quick, clear decision and giving me no chance to argue. So I think in all situations, I just think you need to really understand. I bring it back every time. You really need to understand your people. Like, they loved the fact that I knew who was married to police officers, wives, teachers, care workers. They loved the fact that I knew that, how many children they have, and that there I was straight in the sort of ops room figuring out how we were gonna who we were gonna stand up to be on readiness to support. The COVID initiative is called Opera Script, and who we were going to stay in work to make sure that we got all of the trainees home in good order and well looked after. And the fact that I could stand there and go instantly, right, this is your situation, you go, this is your situation, are you happy to stay? Yes, you can stay. Are you happy to do part-time? Happy to do flexible working? Take a laptop, do what you can at home. The fact that I knew their situations and I knew their strengths and I could do that, even in that very weird situation that we found ourselves in last March, we were still a united team and came together. So
it just sounds like it's a really strong family again. That that connectivity to kind of go, first of all, the strength in leadership and trust to go. The decision is made. That's the right thing to do. Just go and be with the family, go and do what you need to do. But then the other piece you said there around the people that are remaining all want to collectively step up and give extra to cover one of their own. And again, I compare it to some kind of corporate environments. It might be, all right, so that person's not here, so you're throwing it at me, are you? I've got to deal with that now, have I? Whereas that just exactly, I'm getting overtime. I'm going to have to do more than this now. Why is it always me you pick on? That sort of stuff. There isn't that. There's part of it. Oh, I hope they're okay, but why me? Whereas just that isn't there. That relationship that's built, that family style relationship, really just people just step up for each other.
That true values leadership, that true values. Everybody's so bought into those values. You are those values. You are that brand. Yeah. I don't want to say that we're brainwashed or we're indoctrinated. We're not.
No, I think it's bought into.
It's really signed up to good values.
I think it sounds like a culture that you built together and you've all signed up to together, and an agreed set of standards that you talked about earlier, and values that you all want to live by and through, as opposed to sometimes where companies might actually, more sort of like the corps again, might go, It's not built on the values. The values are the thing that kind of come in afterwards. So this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and these are the values we're going to show while we do it. And then it's kind of, you know, it might be unkind to say it's an afterthought in all circumstances, but quite often it is. And then, but the focus then is on what we need to do as opposed to who we are and who we're doing it with.
Yeah.
Whereas it's very much the other way. It's building that connection first. We talked when we chatted last week, we talked about Stephen Covey's book Around the Speed of Trust.
Yeah.
And we said, you know, it's about making all that emotional deposits into those relationships, into that trust account. So at times when the going does get a little bit tougher, we can withdraw from that account and there's no problems. We're not going into the red. Yes. Whereas if you don't build that up to start with, and not because you're doing it for any other reason than wanting to build it up and wanting to connect, then if that's not there and you suddenly need to withdraw, that's when the trouble starts, because you're overdrawn straight away.
Definitely.
All credit card bills. And
yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. I absolutely love that conversation, Shad. Thank you so much. I think, you know, I think the insight of just your stories and your experience is fantastic. I also think the lessons, I mean, one of the biggest thing I take away from a business leader point of view and corporate companies and senior leadership teams is just that idea of when people come in, everyone's taught and mentored as to what leadership and followership is. That's such a massive gap that doesn't happen. And for me, it's with you talking about it in the way you have, it's a glaringly obvious gap that no one's done. And that's where it all starts. That's a catalyst for this way of leadership and family and team building that you've talked about. So thank you for that. I'm going to make sure that that's front and center on the description of the episode, because I think that's something people need to take notice. Yeah. One thing we need to do is, based on what we've chatted about, is to come up with a title.
Well, we were kicking around before about how in the army, we obviously lead, we don't manage.
Yeah.
And I said, quite off the cuff, that there's no soul in management. And I suppose what I meant here is all what I've talked about. So just to quote Slim again, leadership is just plain you. Be true to yourself, be honest and be a human, and just put your soul into serving your team and leading your team. And I feel that in management, you're potentially just a bit mechanical and it's a bit administration, whereas in leadership, the emotional side come in. We talked about the trust bank.
Yeah.
So leadership, not manage it. Yeah, I don't know what to say, what the buzzline would be. Leadership, not management of soul, or
yeah. I thought it's got a real ring to it when you said that, you know, there is no soul in management. And I think, you know, for me, there's an order thing around it. If you just go into things with a management mindset, the soul is missing 100%. But if you lead in the way that you've talked about, then there'll become a point where maybe there is more of that management that needs to happen for a moment, that again, that we've kind of talked about, we've just not labeled it as that. And at that moment, there's enough in the bank again. That doesn't need that to bring more soul for a second, because all the connection and all the relationship is there. And then you straight back into connection mode when it's required. But yeah, I mean, well, the two things I've written down there was, one, obviously there's no soul in management, because you came up with that just before we came on the recording. And the other one was leadership and followership, just because of what we talked about. But I think the first one's got the ring to it.
So I mean, even with the leadership and followership pieces, you can't lead without followers, and you can't be a leader without knowing how to follow. And I don't think that anybody leads without being a follower of some description. Unless you're truly at the top. And I'm trying to think who's truly at the top, because obviously in the UK we have a parliament, so it's democratic. I know we have a prime minister, but he's got a party behind him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, you know, who truly is just pure leader with no one who they are following.
And even then, in the way that you've talked about, you've almost flipped the hierarchy. So those people that are really at the top are actually really at the bottom, and they're following the people below them to serve them and learn from them.
because you've got to look down, you've got to look sideways, you've got to serve, to lead. Like, leadership's service. You're not, if you're there for your own gains, then you're not going to do very well, because you're absolutely nothing without the team and without your followers. Yep. So yeah, you are flipped on your head. It's a life of service, and I don't say that like to play it down or anything, but it really is, and that's where you'll get your biggest gains and your rewards from.
Right, so I'm going to give you the casting vote. There's no soul in management, leadership and followership. You're nothing without your team.
I like you're nothing without your team.
You're nothing without your team.
Yeah, and I think that as the way that the conversation's gone, we've talked more about that.
Yeah, 100%. Love that. See, the best laid plans, we love that one at the start. Yeah. And you just have a conversation, look at the stuff that comes out of it, gold. Absolutely brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that, Charlotte. I think that, like I said, there's so many lessons in there for people to, from a self-management and also leadership of their team's point of view. And I hope that loads of people, including myself, will start taking some of those learns and applying them in their everyday relationships and jobs and focus and leadership styles. I'll certainly be advocating for the leadership and the followership stuff whenever I'm working now. It's certainly given me that key moment. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your story, and also thank you for your post on LinkedIn that started all this as well. I think it's truly an inspirational post, and I think it's something that I said to you last week as well. There is that everything you talked about, that vulnerability to just put yourself out there and go, this is me and this is what I believe, and there's a truth and honesty around that. So thank you for sharing that, and absolutely great conversation. I've enjoyed it, and I hope you have too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Time has flown past.
Oh, it does, trust me. The years, not just the hours. Brilliant stuff. Well, thank you. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Definitely, when I'm next up in Congleton.
Yes, we're going to go for a Costa coffee, I believe. Yeah. Brilliant stuff. Have a good one. See you soon. So that brings us to the end of the Leadership Untitled podcast for today. This episode will be called You're Nothing Without Your Team. All that remains is for me to again thank Charlotte for joining me today and providing some wonderful stories and tips around leadership from the army that I think we could all really, really learn from. And thanks you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, then please make sure you subscribe to the podcast platform of your choice or on the YouTube channel for future episodes. And if you'd like to get in touch with me, just simply look at me on robmoores.com or email me at rob@robmoores.com, or again, just get to me on LinkedIn. Speak soon. Bye now.